So when this Radiomaster MT12 came out about 4 or 5 months ago, I was pretty happy to see that there was going to be a nice, cheap, great option for the RC racer or just the basher community or whatever. Now, for racing, of course, I've been using my Sanwa M17 and it's been fantastic. I've had some issues with it. As far as like mechanical, how I feel the trigger and stuff is, just trying to find the right spring rates and tension. This thing I got originally when I was drag racing, and I'll tell you right off the bat, this is not going to do what that does for drag racing until somebody can maybe figure it out, and that's going to be the big problem. I'm just going to start right off the bat that, like, if you aren't like me and you haven't flown FPV for years and been in this type of ecosystem with Edge TX and Express LRS, you're probably going to hate this radio. You're going to have to watch hours of YouTube videos to try to figure things out, but it might be worth it for these $15 receivers and the Express LRS protocol, which literally is the same speed, if not faster than the Sanwa protocol. Now, we don't really know how fast certain protocols are, like Vitaba doesn't post their specs. There's a guesstimate that it's close to this, maybe around 2 to 3 milliseconds, but that's what we're getting out of the Radiomaster, and that's what we've been getting out of the Sanwa. And then, of course, you combine their telemetry feature with their servos that I run too. You can do on-the-fly adjustments and things like that. But I found that I really haven't got a lot of value with that. So why do I have this Radiomaster? Well, the reason is this right here. This little Sanwa receiver went bad. And in order to replace this thing, it's $110. You can buy knockoffs for like 50, 60 bucks on Amazon, but I decided that I wanted to try the Radiomaster. A, because I could do the programming on it, felt very comfortable with that. And B, I wanted to try something more with the mechanics. Now, one thing I noticed with the Sanwa M17, and I'm just going to demonstrate this for everybody right now, do a lot of on-road racing. So, you know, you're on and off the throttle, you're turning, all of that kind of stuff. I've always noticed that the Sanwa is very, very picky. So if you look at the throttle servo channel monitor there, and if I'm simulating how I'm racing and I'm letting off, you can see that I am dropping down to like 50 to 60% just letting off regularly. That is way too much, especially in like 12 scale when we're driving a spool, because even though it's a spec motor and it's not that powerful, coming off the throttle that much and then coming back on really upsets the car, especially for an inexperienced driver like myself. Gear diff in the F1 car, you know, you need to get on off that throttle, get back on it so you can turn around the corner, let the gear diff do its thing. And, you know, in order to just barely get off the throttle with the Sanwa M17, I mean, you literally just have to like move the trigger like a millimeter, and it is already dropping itself way down. Is there ways around it? I'm sure we could probably do something. You know, there's different ways of doing expo curves and stuff like that, but then you're like curving on the way up with the throttle and not curving on the way down, so on and so forth. Now, the one thing about the Sanwa that I would notice is that if I was a dual action racer, as in I had enough skill to brake race, so like brake at the corner, back off, brake at the corner, back on, this has got a way shorter throw and you can adjust this and everything else. This is what I would need. But immediately with the MT12, I have a very, very long trigger throw for me, which is great. And what that means is that I can back off at a normal pace, and I'm only going to be backing off to about maybe 75 to 80% of throttle. So we're going to, in essence, be driving better and saving time. The other thing that the MT12 does come with is a smaller wheel, which means that you won't be cranking and ham-fisting and stuff all the time. Now, it's a little bit smaller than the one that's on the Sanwa, not terribly smaller, and you can print different 3D modifications I have around here somewhere to put any kind of wheel that you really want on this radio or this one. You can go up to, I've seen people with big front buggy wheels. I've seen people with little 12 scale wheels. So there's all kinds of that stuff. So here we are with it, and I've raced oval with it last night on the TTO2, which isn't a huge experiment, but it went very well. I ran just as fast as I normally do, and I noticed that I was able to do what I intended to do, which was let off and hit the apex a lot more consistently with the trigger pull. The only thing that I really had to get used to kind of still was the steering and the steering rate and all that kind of stuff. So big thing to think about. Now let's just talk about the whole radio experience itself. And you know, again, there's been a lot of videos on these that are out there. Some people, of course, aren't racers. When they originally sent this thing out, they sent it out to all the FPV people, and they were the only people that knew how to actually program the damn thing. Now, I could create all of my models, but instead of going through all that process, because it would have been painstaking, I just stole the model from Joshua Bardwell. He is one of the biggest FPV YouTubers, if not the biggest, and he actually took the time to set all this stuff up, move it into a slash, and kind of learn it and kind of help people along with it. So it's much appreciated. So look him up on here, go on to YouTube, and you can download his model and move it over to this one. And then you can literally just start copy and pasting it and make your individual models. You can see right now, I just have two models that I'm working on, TTO2, and we're doing the F1 now, and then I will do the GT12. And what we're doing is we're using the little Radiomaster 3-channel receivers here, which are super awesome. And, you know, they're very small. They're $16. They make a 5-channel as well if you want. And these things can be hooked up, updated with the firmware to match everything. I didn't really see a need to do any firmware updates out of the box on this stuff because there's been many releases on the 3.0 or 3.3 platform, whatever they're on now. I think 3.3. So I'm pretty happy with the way everything goes. The only thing that I will need to do that is in some videos is you can actually set the frequency of the channels that we're using. So you can match the frequency of, like, say, your steering servo with the channel on here, so that way it operates properly. It's not like noisy and going crazy and all that stuff. But this thing to a normal RC or a racer or whatever is just not going to make sense. You don't have the right terminology. You don't have a steering page. You don't have a throttle page. You have inputs, outputs, setup, drive modes, which is, kind of think of that as like R mode, where you can change things globally and put them on a switch and change through all that kind of stuff. You've got special mixes, you know, in your outputs screen here, for example, which is pretty hard to see with the backlight. Sorry about that, but this is where you set like your sub trims. So it's just not intuitive for racers at all. I know how to do it and I can figure it out, but the percentage of people that are going to want to deal with this is like super small. So my first advice to like the Edge TX and Express LRS community is they need to reskin this operating system for RC racing surface people. Match the terminology, match how things go, all that needs to be done. I know it's open source and people aren't going to spend the time, but you can go and buy a FlySky that's already got all that stuff done for you, and it has more advanced features built into it already for RC car racing, like ABS braking, that kind of stuff already programmed into it, versus this madness that we're looking at here. You know, for example, this first column here is your subtrims. So when I plug my steering in to channel 1, I'm going to have to edit this line and go in and change this number right here to subtrim out my car. And of course, thanks to Josh's model, I've got things like dual rate, trim, all that kind of stuff set up around the actual switches here. But again, it's called weight, it's called limit, all this non-RC terminology. So it's a big ask for a lot of people. For me, I think it's going to work out. We're going to go to the track tomorrow and do some testing, and we'll do some live video and report back on everything. But that's just kind of where we're at. So right now what I'm going to do is install the receiver onto the F1 car and bind it up and just kind of give you a brief overview of what everybody else has really already done, just kind of coming from my perspective. So the easiest way to bind this thing is you can plug your ESC into any channel because it's got the power rail built into the whole thing. A lot of times on regular ESCs, that does not work. So you want to make sure you're at the main menu here and you want to press System, and we're going to go into Express LRS. And what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to the bind. But what you're going to want to do is power this thing on and off 3 times, and then on the 4th time, you're going to get a really fast flashing type of thing going on. So we're going to click bind on here, and now it's going to say it's binding. So we're going to go on, off, on, off, on, off, on. And at that point, we should be bound. And indeed we are, but we're not calibrated or anything at all. So we'll go ahead and turn the ESC off. And usually when the ESC isn't calibrated, it's going to give you a fit. So you're just going to have to disconnect it from power completely. So let's just go ahead and set this up. So since we're in Express LRS, it doesn't matter what channel we're using. I am using channel 1 for throttle. I want to make sure that all of my stuff is trimmed and centered. All right, so everything is there, and then we're going to go through the typical hobby wing programming process. All right, so now you can see we're calibrated. We've got forward, and then of course we don't have reverse, but we got brake. So we are good to go as far as the hobby wing calibration goes. So the next thing we're going to do is set up the servo. In order to do that, we're going to turn the radio off, turn the car off, and turn it back on. And then what we're going to be looking for here in about 60 seconds is this thing is going to go into a super blinky mode. So it's going to start blinking real fast. And what that is doing is creating a Wi-Fi hotspot for us to actually log in to that receiver. And from here, you can do things like set a binding phrase, update firmware, all that kind of stuff. But really what I want to do is just change the servo frequency on channel 2 to 333 megahertz, which should be the speed that the Sanwa servo inside of there is going to operate at. So eventually this thing will start rapidly. So there is our rapid blinking, and you can see that we've got that going on here. What we need to do is come down here and we need to connect to Express LRS RX, and the password for that is Express LRS. And you can see here now that we are logged in. You can change the Wi-Fi time if you want to, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to do anything except for go over here to model, and we are going to be running channel 2, and we want channel 2 to be at 333, and we'll start with that and see how that works. And then all we're going to do down here is just click save. Configuration is updated, and that will basically get our steering servo talking at the right speed. So now we'll turn it off, turn the car back on, and we'll find our steering servo wire and plug it in channel 2. And now we have steering, and you can see that our steering is definitely way off on this car, and don't know why it looks so bad like that. Guess it's because our sub trims are that far out on everything. That's kind of weird. Guess it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be right there. So you can see just 15 on the sub trim, and now we've got steering. And probably what I'll end up doing now is I'll probably put it on a setup station, and I'm going to use pretty much the exact same screen. If you see right here, there is a min and max. So on this output screen where the sub trim is, there is a min and max. And that's basically your EPA. Again, it's not under a steering screen or anything else like that. It's min and max. So I will eventually just put this on the setup station and set it up, my min and max, to whatever percentage that I'm looking for, usually around like 22, 23 degrees of steering. But I can tell right now that we're definitely just getting a little too much. So I can actually probably just go ahead and back this down maybe to like 90 on each side, and then we can kind of get a feeling for it and go from there. And really with the F1, what I try to do is just set it up so the wheels are basically parallel with the actual arm plates, and that's usually a good starting spot as far as having the enough steering in the F1. So you're not getting a little too crazy on overcorrecting. But again, I'll have to put this thing on the setup station, but it's not in the cards for me tonight. So the right looks like it might be, they both might be turning in a little bit too much, but I think you guys kind of get the idea. And now, as you can hear, we've got everything hooked up. Transponder's working, fan is working, steering and throttle and brake. So we're all ready for the track with the F1. Now I'm going to go ahead and get this set up in the GT12, and we'll be ready to go. Now, the last thing I would probably mention is power output. This thing, I think, is capable up to 100 milliwatts power, maybe a little bit more. I started at 10 milliwatt, and I settled on 50 just because I was getting some fail safes on it at 10 milliwatt. And you know, I want to run the fastest protocol that I can on ExpressLRS, but I also don't want to run like full power because I could take the chance of coming around and the electronics getting over swamped and it going into a failsafe mode. Now, any RC remote can do this. This isn't just something that you can deal with here, but since you're dealing with such a fast and complicated like packet ecosystem that, you know, you could mix and match different receivers with the radio. Some might not end up performing as well as others. So when I first run this around the bigger track, I will have audible telemetry notifications on to make sure that we are good all the way around. And if there's any spots up there that I feel are a little bit too far away, even though 50 milliwatt with this is fine. You got to remember, these little receivers just have a circuit board mounted ceramic antenna in them, kind of like the smaller versions, this right here of this is the knockoff $492 or whatever receiver from Amazon for the Sanwa RC. So we'll test all that out and everything, and I mean, I think we should be good. So I'm super excited. We'll take you guys to the track when we do all that testing. But that is all you really need to know about this radio system. There's plenty of videos out there. Make the call for yourself, but I would heed my advice. This is probably frustration for 95% of you. It's probably not worth the money unless you have 30 ready to run cars with remotes laying around and you want to throw them all trash and go down to one, and you can afford $15 receivers instead of $35 or $60 Spectrums. How's that? Talk to you guys later. Peace.